bookwalkers, welcome back to Get Me a Library. Today we're doing a video all about Aries. His Greek mythology name is Aries and his Roman mythology name is Mars. So as we know from my Aphrodite video, which you can check out here, or the playlist, you'll know that he was Mars and she was Venus, and they have many love affairs. They're in love with each other. Venus, Mars, Aphrodite, Aries, all linked perfectly. So let's find out a little bit about Aries. So Aries's parents are Hera and Zeus, which means that he is technically the actual prince of the Olympians, because his mother and father are both the king and queen. It's very rare that Hera and Zeus actually had a child together, but when they did, they had someone like Aries, because usually Zeus would have children like Athena on his own, and Hera would have children like Hephaestus on her own, whereas this one, he was actually the son of both the king and queen. So he's most known for god of war. So he played a major part in things like the Trojan Wars and any other wars that the Greeks would have. He liked to get involved, especially in the Trojan War, with his best friend Eris, who was goddess of mischief and discord, and she was worse than him. She loved the bloodshed, she loved all of that, whereas he was a little bit more strategic, not quite as strategic, not quite as much as Athena, who was wisdom and had her battle strategies, but he was still very much like that, which is why in Hercules, the TV series and film by Disney, you'll see that they were brother and sister, because they were both meant to be seen like opposites but both involved in the same thing. But it's not true, because Hera didn't actually have them both as her children. But yeah, so he was mainly seen as god of war, and you'll see him in things like Greek mythology. But you'll also see him in things like Wonder Woman, which is based on Greek mythology, because she is Diane, princess of the Amazons, and her mother Hephaestus, who lived on a place called Themyscira, who were the Amazonians, and Aries is seen as a father of the Amazonians, but he's seen as the villain in that story. So yeah, he's based in comics as well as Greek mythology, and every time that there would be a war or you wanted to win, you would often pray to Aries, the god of war. So he had many lovers. His most famous one was Aphrodite, and as we know from the story from Aphrodite and Hephaestus, they had many love stories and love affairs, and at one point Hephaestus decided to trap them in the bed with some chains, make them feel very embarrassed and tell all the gods and goddesses all about that, and their love affair was revealed, and Aphrodite, not long after that I believe, divorced Hephaestus. It's not known if she actually married Aries, but she probably did. But they themselves had lots of children together. The most popular one was Eris, who was Cupid, who was, well, he shoot those bow and arrows at people, made them fall in love with each other and caused a little bit of mischief problems, but he was Cupid basically. They also had Antiochus, Demeos, Phoebus and Harmonia. He also had one with Eris, who was the goddess of dawn, with whom Aries had a brief love affair with. She was cursed by rampant sexuality by jealous Aphrodite, and no offspring were ever created by this pair. So although Aries and Aphrodite were many love affairs and they had loved each other, she was obviously married to Hephaestus quite a lot of the time. So any time that Aries would find another lover, she would grow jealous, which I get, but they weren't actually together. We have another one called Enyo, who was a god of war and strife and is said to have bore Aries a son. We then have Persephone. The gods Aries, Hermes, Apollo and Hephaestus all wooed Persephone before her marriage to Hades. Demeter rejected all their gifts and everything. She didn't even want her to marry Hades in the end. You have Harmonia, who is a goddess nymph who was seduced by Aries in the woods, and she bore him the first of the Amazons in their tribe. He had another one with another goddess nymph, another nymph called from Argos, whom the gods Aries and Hermes competed over in a boxing match. Hermes won and lay with her. Portrayed as wearing red with this great big helmet, riding into battle with his horse, stallion or whatever, along with Eris, and like I say, they played a great big part in the Trojan War, and he's always seen as this battled up god. He's not always seen as a bad guy. However, in Percy Jackson, he's seen as a bad guy. He's seen as someone who is not very nice, someone very nasty. But when you read Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe, you'll see that he isn't necessarily a bad guy, even though he has been in quite a few stories. And just because he's God of War doesn't mean he's bad. It depends on the story and the legend and the myth that you want to follow. But I don't think he's completely bad as well. I think it was just... he was made to look bad, doesn't mean that he was bad. A lot like Hades, when you really understand about him and how loyal he was actually to his wife, you understand that just because someone's labelled as something doesn't mean that they are. Looks can be deceiving, remember? We spoke about the main story with him and Aphrodite and about how their love affair happened and all that kind of stuff, and about their funny story involving Hephaestus, which you can check out in the videos, which will probably be a little bit better than me having to explain it again in case you have already watched those videos. There isn't major stories involving him. He was always in the background of wars and battles and things like that, and if there was any fights with the gods, he'd definitely be there cheering a couple of them on and getting involved. Other than him and Eris and his many love affairs and Aphrodite, there isn't much known about him. He is in stories, he is in backgrounds, he has been kidnapped and ensnared by lots of other gods. He couldn't fight Hephaestus off when he went and tried to bring him back to Mount Olympus so that he could take her out of the chair that he created, to kidnap her and to keep her ensnared in his trap. But he wasn't able to fight off Hephaestus, which means that he was definitely a love rival. He was definitely, not if stronger than him because of his contraptions, but he was definitely someone who he was able to compete with. Like, he was definitely a threat into his life. I mean, he took Aphrodite away from him when he wanted to be with Aphrodite. I don't know if Zeus just didn't give permission, because Zeus was very smart in certain ways. He believed a lot of stories and legends against him, so if they said that your son is now going to overthrow you, he was very much like worried about his children overthrowing him like he did with his father. So to put Ares marrying, say for example Aphrodite, they together could create children and be just as powerful. It's not that the children would then hurt Zeus, it's the fact that he would then have more children that were stronger than him, which would help to get their parents to be king and queen. There's always a theory and a suspicion that Zeus had, which is why in Lore Olympus, if you've read the comic, he didn't want anyone to marry Persephone when he found out about her. You know, there's things as fertility goddesses and stuff. Anyone that anyone that was a threat towards Zeus, he didn't want them to live basically or be a part of anything. So yeah, that's basically the summary of Aries. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if there's anything that you know about him that I haven't spoken about. If there's anything you want to know more about, if you want to know a bit more about his children, let me know and I'll try and find some images and stuff and message you back about that. Until then, let me know if you like Aries. Do you like him? I mean, I quite like him, and I like the fact that he's linked to comic books, and I've always loved like reading about DC and Ares in there and him being evil and mean and stuff like that, but actually there's still a lot more to him. I like him in Lore Olympus. He's not as bad as you think. There's a lot more to him. But yeah, until then, I'll see you guys soon. Bye.